Hey everyone, welcome back to Headlines. With this decade coming to a close, we'll be wrapping up the year with a roundup of the biggest stories of 2019. Let's start off with space. 2019 was an astronomical year for space exploration and findings. Remember Transformers: Dark of the Moon, where astronauts found some horrifyingly grotesque alien machines on the far side of the moon? In January, China became the first ever country to land their Chang'e 4 space probe on the far side of the moon, but they didn't find any of the aliens that were seen in the blockbuster hit. April saw Israel launching but crashing their Bereshit spacecraft. And in September, India launched its Chandrayaan-2 space mission. It was also aimed at exploring the moon's south pole, but Indian scientists went through 15 minutes of terror when they lost contact with their probe as it was touching down. The probe has been found through satellite imagery, and a technical glitch caused the disconnection. But who knows? Maybe it wasn't just a glitch. Maybe there are Transformers up there after all. Now, Trump. It's been a tough year for Trumpel-Thinskin. While a variety of smaller events have played out in the background, like Trump's ill-fated meetup with NATO leaders last week, his Sharpiegate hurricane scandal back in September, and the government shutdown in January, the one main event concerning US politics and Donald Trump was, or rather is, his impeachment inquiry. Trump made a phone call to President Zelensky of Ukraine, asking him to announce an investigation into Joe and Hunter Biden's business dealings in Ukraine in exchange for critical military aid. This was leaked, and an impeachment process was started on the basis that Trump was using his power for personal gain. With a Democrat majority in the House of Representatives and Nancy Pelosi, a Democrat, as the Speaker, Trump's bumpy ride doesn't look like it's getting a lot smoother. Brexit. A political issue that became a joke, with teenagers making fun of it on TikTok, is reaching its endgame. The UK's year started off with Prime Minister Theresa May promising to deliver Brexit, then quitting when she figured out she wouldn't be able to. In came Boris Johnson as the Prime Minister in September, but after facing some bumps in the road with Brexiting, he decided to call for general elections. Some more bumps later, and Bojo called for a general election on the 12th of December. Many pundits predicted he would lose badly in what would essentially be another vote on Brexit, but Johnson and his Conservatives won a landslide victory. Now that that's been taken care of, Bojo needs to deliver Brexit on the 31st of January 2020. Boeing's 737 MAX was a catastrophe. It was supposed to succeed its most popular model, the 737, and was designed to be lighter and more fuel efficient. Boeing claimed that the new 737 MAX was so similar to the 737 that pilots just needed 2 to 3 hours of iPad training and they'd be good to go. What was left unchecked, however, was Boeing's new system, MCAS, which would automatically push the nose of the plane down every time it pointed too far upwards, like when taking off. Pilots didn't know exactly how to override it. This led to the Lion Air 610 crash back in 2018 and the Ethiopian Airlines 302 crash in March this year. In both cases, pilots struggled to control the plane as MCAS refused to cooperate, leading to stalls and crashes, with everyone on board being killed. The FAA is investigating, and almost 500 737 MAXs have been grounded worldwide. Boeing has stopped the production of the 737 MAX as they don't expect the case to be closed anytime soon. Terrorism. 2019 witnessed its share of terror attacks. Islamic terrorists killed 21 people at the upscale Dusit D2 complex in Nairobi in mid-January. On March 15th, the Al-Noor Mosque and the Lincoln Islamic Center in Christchurch experienced a shooting by a white supremacist that killed 51 people and injured 49. This led to an immediate strengthening of New Zealand's gun control laws and a compassionate anti-discrimination campaign led by Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern. On Easter Sunday, 3 churches and 3 luxury hotels in Colombo were targeted in a series of coordinated terrorist suicide bombings that ISIS claimed responsibility for. And most depressingly, this year also saw fatal school shootings in the USA. Of the 52 weeks of this year, we've had 45 various school shootings. That's like 1 every 2 weeks. This year saw protests crop up like MacKeeper ads. In Chile, they were against a metro fare hike. In Bolivia, they were up against President Evo Morales after he tampered with the electoral system. He stepped down and was granted political asylum in Mexico. In Iraq, protesters demonstrated against 6 years of corruption, unemployment, and inefficient public services before they escalated into calls to overthrow the administration and to stop the Iranian intervention in Iraq. Abdul-Mahdi, the Prime Minister of Iraq, stepped down after this. And in Iran, there were protests against increased fuel prices that led to more than 400 people being killed. China got locked in a bitter trade battle with the USA as Trump accused them of unfair trade practices and imposed $34 billion in tariffs on Chinese goods. China followed suit, and thus began a trade war. A Phase 1 deal was reached last week, but experts say there needs to be a winner for this to end. In Hong Kong, protests against an extradition bill started in June and morphed into a struggle for universal suffrage. While the bill was shelved in September, Hong Kongers continued to protest for 5 demands, not one less. The protests helped pro-democracy activists in Hong Kong as they swept the local district elections, putting pressure on Beijing. USA's Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act was drafted up, and it aimed at penalizing those who violated the rights of people in Hong Kong. China also found themselves in a hot mess as leaked images, videos, and then documents shone a light on the large-scale practice of sending Xinjiang's Uyghur Muslims to prison camps. The camps violate human rights. Muslims are sent to the camps without any trial, kept there for however long the state deems fit, and are forced to renounce Islam. China says the camps were aimed at countering terrorism and giving people job skills, but various sources have said they're simply there to wipe out Islam. We now move to the Middle East. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the leader of ISIS and the world's most wanted man with a $25 million bounty on his head, died on the 26th of October. During a US Army raid of a compound in Idlib, Syria, where he was staying, he detonated a suicide vest. This was great news for the world, although it's very likely that ISIS will spring up again soon. Saudi Arabia and Yemen haven't had a great relationship this year. On September 14th, drones and missiles flattened the Abqaiq oil refinery and the Khurais oil field, both in Saudi Arabia. These attacks set off fires so large that they could be seen from space. The only other things that can be seen so clearly from space is the Great Wall and Justin Bieber's ego. The attacks on the oil facilities were claimed by Houthi rebels from Yemen. India became decidedly less diverse this year. The Air Force bombed a terrorist camp in Pakistan in response to an attack on an Indian Army convoy. This nearly triggered a nuclear war. Prime Minister Narendra Modi used these incidents to get himself re-elected and then revoked Article 370 of the Indian Constitution to strip Kashmir of its long-standing autonomy as a special region. The Kashmiri people had no say in this decision. Modi even went a step further and imposed a complete lockdown on the region. Then his government drafted and passed a Citizenship Amendment Act that granted citizenship to a host of religious minorities from neighboring countries, but explicitly excluded Muslims. Now there are protests all across India as students decide that they don't like what the country is being made into. This year saw some incendiary action. The historic Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris was destroyed by an accidental fire. A pledge to save and restore Notre Dame garnered almost 1 billion euros. Ironic, since at the same time wildfires raged in the Amazon rainforests, destroying 3 million acres of land and trees. That received only $30 million in donations, which have gone to different charities dedicated to preventing more fires from spreading in the area. $5 million came from Leonardo DiCaprio, and around $20 million came from the G7. Now, you know the world's messed up when an actor donates more than each of the most economically powerful countries in the world. Then we had the Californian wildfires that destroyed 250,349 acres of land, injuring 24 people and killing 5. And finally, a fire blazed through an illegal factory in Delhi, killing 43 people as they slept. The world saw climate strikes led by youngsters in many cities as they decided to ditch school and protest against the government's indifference to climate change. Some teachers would say it was all a clever scheme to cut class, but we all know better. The leader of these strikes was 16-year-old Swede, Greta Thunberg. She brought a fiery passion and commitment to raising awareness of climate change to such an extent that world leaders like Trump and Brazil's Jair Bolsonaro were reduced to whimpering idiots on Twitter as she absorbed their negative energy and used it to grow stronger. A real-life Captain Marvel who's now the youngest person to be Time's Person of the Year. On a darker note, the UN's climate change conference COP25 delivered a steaming pile of the world's finest manure as developing and developed nations failed to reach an agreement. The world crossed some climate tipping points too. Extreme heating of 5 degrees Celsius was considered the tipping point, but recent data suggested that very bad things could happen between 1 and 2 degrees. We've already heated up by 1 degree Celsius and the temperature continues to rise. Drastic changes to our lifestyles, like switching to plant-based diets and cutting fossil fuel use, are needed to prevent planetary destruction. And to cap your year with a bright fact about dogs, Netherlands became the first ever country in the world to eliminate stray dogs completely, not by euthanasia, but rather by fostering education, free vet care, and rehoming. That's all for this year. I'll see you next time on Headlines.